Here's a case that occurred over a 17-month period between April 1971 and September of 1972. When the Phantom was done, 5 girls and a woman were dead, and all of Washington, D.C. was worrying. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good day, whenever you're seeing this. It is my third Halloween related episode. My name is Sean, and this is my true crimes. So I've been going with the theme. If you haven't noticed, I'm trying to find some scary true crimes that, I find kind of freaky. Most of them are ones that they never solved. So that means the perpetrator could still be out there someplace. If you are new here, welcome. I hope you enjoy. If you are a returner, then welcome back. I appreciate your patronage. Like I always say, like, subscribe, comment. It helps me do better, and it helps me know what people are looking for. So if there's a crime that you want to hear about, or you think other people might want to hear about, comment. I will look it up. I've done it before, and I will do it again. That all being said, with subscribers, I can get more and more things out there. I'm trying to do it weekly, and I'd love to do it more often than once a week, but I need more subscribers to know that I'm doing something right. So, with that all being said, let's get started in the Freeway Phantom case out of Washington, D.C. Before I start, I need to give a trigger warning. Whenever I talk about certain subjects, I usually try to refer to them in different terms instead of using the most common terms. And many of these cases do involve sexual assault, but I don't go into great detail. Because one, YouTube doesn't allow it, and two, I don't really think it needs to be said. If I just say that they were assaulted sexually, enough said. You don't need to know all the nitty gritty, the gross details. And, the other part of this that is, I would consider a trigger warning because it bothered me, is that all of the people that I'm talking about that have been murdered in this are black girls between the ages of 10 to 18. So, there's my trigger warning. I hope that it's not going to affect anyone and that you can continue to watch, because it's a very interesting case. So, that being said, this is the case of the Freeway Phantom. In the 1970s and before, many larger cities in America had dealings with serial killers. But in 1971, it was Washington, D.C.'s turn. They never experienced having a serial killer before this time. And it would take 4 murders before they realized that they were all actually connected. So it took a little bit. They didn't see all the patterns and the similarities, even though 2 of the victims were found right near each other. But they didn't piece it together that they were part of the same thing. On April 25th, 1971, Carol Denise Spinks was on her way back from 7-Eleven. She went there to get some groceries. Um, I've read different things that her sister sent her and that her mother didn't know she was out and met her on the way and told her to get her butt there and back. I couldn't find that in the main article that I was reading, but it was said that that happened. It was basically almost like about a mile back and forth to the place, to there and back home. So they were used to having her, she was used to walking that distance. Unfortunately, she didn't return home this day. And she was found 6 days later behind St. Elizabeth's Hospital. This is right behind the hospital located off of I-295, and she was laying in the grass. She was 13. They noticed that she was assaulted both physically and sexually. She died by strangulation. She was completely dressed, but her shoes were missing. They found some green fibers on her body, or on her clothing, and some hair that when they gene typed it or whatever, they found that it belonged to a black male. It was unknown how long she had been left there, but it was determined that she had been killed a few days previously. So they had that, and when they, checked her stomach, they found out that she had eaten something prior to her death. So whoever kidnapped her did feed her prior to killing her. Darlenia Denise Johnson was on the way back, or on her way to work when she was taken. It was July 8th, 1971. She was working a summer job at the Oxon Hill Recreation Center. A witness stated that they saw her in an older black car driven by an older black male. Other than that, they didn't have any other leads. She was found 11 days later. She was found 15 feet from where Carol was found. And what's terrible is that the police were notified like a week earlier that they saw that's the person who called said that they saw a body right there off of the highway, just like Carol was. And the police, instead of getting out and searching, they just drove by, looked around, did a little search, and found nothing. So she laid there for like 7 more days before it was reported, hey, there is still a body here. And they went there, and then they finally discovered her body. The bad thing is that July, it's pretty hot out there. She had decomposed too much to determine any types of assault that she might have gotten. And they weren't positive on how she died, but she was still strangled. They could tell that she was still strangled. She was dressed, but still missing her shoes. They found some more green fibers, and apparently somehow they still found some black hair, or some hair of a black man. That's kind of cocky for him to leave her in the same exact spot that he left his first victim. I mean, I know that serial killers like to keep a area, but God, right like 15 feet away, it's it appears that maybe he picked this spot because he could pull over off the side of the road, toss them into the grass, and then drive away. And that's the reason they assume that's the reason he dropped them off there. But the killer was getting more brazen this time, because 8 days later, he would take his third victim. On July 27th, 1972, Brenda Faye Crockett was sent to the store by her mom, and when she didn't return, the family went out to search the neighborhood. They were aware of the other girls that had died, so they ran out and started looking for her. They didn't call the police right away because, it was the black community and they weren't positive that the cops really cared. Um, they left her 7-year-old sister at home, and around 9:20 p.m., the phone rang and the 7-year-old picked up the phone. Brenda was on the other line. She was crying and she said a white man had picked her up and that she'll be heading home in a cab. She added that she thought she was in Virginia, said bye, and hung up. And the 7-year-old, just, didn't know what to do. And for some odd reason, Brenda called back a little bit later, and this time her stepdad answered. She repeated the same exact thing that she said before, with one exception. This time she asked, "Did my mom see me? Or did my mother see me?" She indicated that she was alone with a white man in a house. Over the phone, her dad heard heavy footsteps, and Brenda whispered, "I'll see you," and then hung up. The police concluded that the unsub was maybe feeding her some inaccurate information just to throw off the investigation. It was thought that maybe the mother saw the unsub, or that Brenda was looking out of the window and the mother might have looked in that direction and didn't see her, and that's what they're thinking. Um, but yeah, mainly they think that the calling was to try to throw off the police and everyone else. So Brenda was located at 5:50 in the morning the next day. She was located off of U.S. Route 50 near the Baltimore Washington Parkway. She was assaulted sexually again, and she was strangled. A scarf was tied around her neck, and yet again she was missing her shoes. They'd also found the fiber and the hair with her. Now, in a lot of cases like this, a serial killer will speed up and go faster. And I mean, he went really quick between the last two girls, and then all of a sudden he took a hiatus. He decided not to do anything, or else they just don't know if he did anything and just never found the bodies. It's unsure. But on October 1st of 1971, when Neomosha, I think is her name, Neomosha Yates was walking home from a store, and she was abducted. The 12-year-old was found only 3 hours later, just off the shoulder of Pennsylvania Avenue, just into the state of Maryland. She again was assaulted, both sexually and physically, and she was strangled. Again, her shoes were missing. When with this case, they released that green fibers had been found on her and all the other victims, and the hair. They never released that before in any of the statements about the deaths. But they were starting to connect, going, "Hey, wait a second, all these other girls have died. So maybe, just maybe, they're connected." A witness stated that they saw her getting into a blue Volkswagen, but this led nowhere. And after this murder, the Daily News dubbed the unsub the Freeway Phantom. Yeah, I don't know what I was going to say about that, but that's okay. He waited another month or so before he did his next killing. After having dinner with a friend, 18-year-old Brenda Denise Woodward boarded a city bus around 11:30 p.m., and this was on November 15th of 1971. She was on her way home to Maryland Avenue. 6 hours later, her body was discovered near the access ramp of Route 202 of the Baltimore-Washington Parkway. This was a little different. She had been stabbed multiple times and strangled. This time she was still wearing her shoes, and a coat was placed over her chest. In one of the pockets was a note. The note read, "This is a tenement to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit to others when you catch me, if you can. Freeway Phantom." They determined that it was written on paper that was taken from Brenda's notebook. Authorities stated that the letter must have been dictated to Brenda since it was in her handwriting. They had a handwriting expert come and look at it just to make sure it was Brenda's handwriting. And he determined that it was. And he stated that there was no duress in the writing to indicate that she might have known the kidnapper. Because, if you're freaking out while you're trying to write something, you're going to see some shakiness and everything in the writing, but they didn't see that. It looked like her normal everyday handwriting. So they're thinking she might have known the kidnapper. Now, there is no mention that they were 100% positive that this was part of the Phantom. But reading and listening to all the different things that I've done for this one, I don't know if it really was, because he stabbed her. None of the other girls were stabbed, and the shoes were still there. Now, something I was reading said that maybe with this one he didn't take her shoes because her name was written on her shoes, so that would be too easy to tie to him, or tie to her if somebody found it. So that could be, but who knows? After this, though, the case went cold for 10 months. 10 months the Phantom had disappeared. For 10 months, people started feeling a little bit more safe. Until September 5th, 1972, when 17-year-old Diane Denise Williams was murdered. She started the evening by cooking for her family, and then she visited her boyfriend's house. After she was done at his place around 11:20 at night, he walked her to the bus stop. She got on the bus and never made it home. She was found a few hours later along I-295, just south of the district line. She was strangled and missing her shoes. There was no signs of sexual assault, even though they found traces of semen. It was assumed to be from the boyfriend, but the boyfriend was adamant that they did not have any sexual relations that night. So they don't know if it was where it came from. Diane's mother stated that she did receive calls from a man. Well, she was receiving calls from somebody like breathing heavily on the phone, and then she'd hang up. She'd get some more calls. But eventually she said that whoever called her said that he killed her daughter. And then she never got another call. Of course, this is back in 1970. They didn't have call tracing and all that stuff. Um, Caller IDs wasn't a thing, so there was nothing they could really do. The case went cold. One thing that I found interesting is that 4 of the 6 girls had the middle name Denise, and I don't know if there is a connection toward it. I mean, nowadays you would have been able to find out people's middle names so then you could get that bigger connection, but back then, I don't know. Um, I just found it interesting. Investigators got many leads and they followed up on them, but nothing ever became of them. Police did come up with some suspects themselves, and they did some footwork. One of the suspects was the members of a gang called the Green Vega Gang. This is a gang that was responsible for a number of sexual assaults in the Washington, D.C. and Maryland area. Somewhere I read that just this gang of guys were responsible for like upwards of 1,000 different sexual assaults in the area in the early 1970s. After many interviews with the gang members, one of them stated that he knew who was responsible for this. He was serving a sentence at Lorton Prison, and he gave details of the crimes only the police and the suspect knew. And he said that he got this stuff from his cohort, his friend, whoever you want to call it. He stated that he would give them all the information if he got a lesser sentence and that he stayed anonymous the whole time because he didn't want it to come back on him that he was a snitch. They agreed to this. The police checked his alibi for each of the murders to make sure he wasn't the perpetrator, and he checked out. He was not, he was busy doing other things during that time, or he was in jail during that time, stuff like that. So he checked out as not being the guilty subject. But before they could get the name from him, a candidate, it was an election year, and one of the candidates publicly stated that the police were working with an inmate at the Lorton prison to catch the Phantom. And they stated that this person had information to catch the subject. Well, he heard this. I actually believe he was in a police car going to show them locations when they heard it over the radio. And he clammed up. He said, "I'm done. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I've already probably said too much, and I don't want it to get back to me. I don't want to get killed or anything like that." So he shut up, and they never got any other information from him. And that was that of those guys. But another suspect was 2 ex-cops, Edward Sullivan and Tommy Simmons. They were arrested for killing Angela Denise Barnes, who was 14. At one point, they thought that she was a victim of the Phantom, but it was debunked. But it was interesting that her middle name's Denise. And these were just crooked cops, but they couldn't really pin any of it on them. So that was slowly dropped off. The last suspect the police publicly had was Robert Askins. In 1977, the 58-year-old was a computer technician. He was arrested and charged with abducting and sexually assaulting a 24-year-old woman. When he was questioned by Detective Lloyd Davis, he admitted to being charged previously for murder on several other occasions. Judicial system back then was a little off, wasn't it? On December 28th, 1938, Askins was 19 years old and served whiskey to prostitutes in his area. The whiskey was laced with cyanide. One of the women, Ruth McDonald, who was 31, died. And then 2 days later, he stabbed another prostitute to death. She was 26-year-old Elizabeth Johnson. Uh, he declared to the police that he was a woman hater. And in April of 1939, he was declared criminally insane and committed to the St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Well, he was released in April of 1952. A few months later, he strangled 42-year-old Laura Cook. He was then again arrested and tried for murder. He was sentenced to 20 years to life, but was released in 1958, so 6 years later. They overturned his conviction, I guess. Then move forward back to 1978, the police searched his home and they found documents all over with the word tantamount in it. And this was an odd word, and it's also was in the letter from the Phantom. And it's a word that is not very much used. But here it is, connecting the dots. They interviewed some of his colleagues at his employment, and they stated that he would frequently use the word tantamount in his speech. Like every other sentence had that word in it. He was never charged as the Phantom Killer and ended up dying in prison at the age of 91 in 2010. I guess the evidence was just too circumstantial to convict him, which is sad. But he would never admit to being even though he had a hatred for women, he never admitted to doing this to those girls. So they couldn't really do anything to him. Who really killed these girls? Who is the person that destroyed 6 different families in 1971 and 1972? This case still remains open. Unfortunately, much of the evidence has gone missing. Some of it was discharged and some of it was just incomplete. I was reading that when they thought that they actually had a suspect, somebody just threw the evidence away, thinking, okay, we already got a suspect, so that's fine. That's not what you do, though. So there is a reward for anyone out there that is hearing this that has any clues to catch the perpetrator. The reward is $150,000. So there's something for you, because somebody has to know something. They either saw something or heard something or know something out there. I mean, the suspect took shoes. If you're cleaning out your grandfather's closet and go, hey, wait, here's a whole bunch of women's shoes. Connect the dots here, people. It's just odd that nobody has come forward and said anything. People might have just dealt with it and didn't even realize it, which is sad. And going back to his note that he wrote to the police, the one thing that I didn't see anything about, he says that it's his insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit to the others when you catch me, if you can. The others. So are there other women out there that they didn't connect to the Phantom Killer? That, it's bad enough that it's six people died, but could it have been more? Could there be a lot of women that have been killed? He killed women back in 1939, 1938. In all that time since 1938, could he have been killing women and they just never connected the dots. I don't know. Oh, sorry. That was 1938 for, sorry. My bad. But if he was the killer, But he denied everything, so he must not have been the killer. But I digress. But he says, could there be others? Well, I'm done rambling. If you have any information, you can call 202 727 9999 or email the Unsolved Division in DC, which is unsolved.murder@dc.gov. So if you know anything, turn it in. There's been other serial killers that have had family members report them and say, hey, I found this and I think my so-and-so is the person that you're looking for. It's happened. Let it happen again. Let's get some closure for these 6 women. Or girls. Ladies. Females. There. Oh, thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm Sean. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. Respect others. I don't care if you believe in it or not. Just respect them. Let's make the world a better place. There's too much death and dying out there. So, love you. See you next time. Or not.